Hello, good people, and welcome to Hillbilly Cat History. Signed, sealed, remembered, somebody's getting married. We're on the set of clam bake, but it's the last day. And then Elvis is moving forward with the rest of his life. And it won't be too long before he's back on the Circle G. Hi, Keith. Hi, Linda. Thank you for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. We'll start off with a song, and this will be Cross on the Circle, because that's what Elvis saw that convinced him he needed to buy the Circle G.
He saw the cross at dawn and said, "It's a good omen, and a dream again." At the break of dawn, through the window pane, he saw a cross in morning rain, white as grace, tall as prayer, calling him to build and share. Not a kingdom, not a throne, but a place of love alone, where laughter rides on horse's breath and peace outshines the fear of death. Come home to the circle and the sign, where the lake reflects the holy line. No one needs money, no one needs fame, just a handshake and a name. Come home where the cross stands tall. Come and share the love of all. Mobile homes and barbecue nights, trucks and trowels and porch light rides, the hand-picked heart to share the dream, a mythic village by the stream. This is more than land, it's grace, refuge carved in sacred space, a gift of love to friends and kin, protected from the world's loud din. Come home to the circle and the sign, where the lake reflects the holy line. No one needs money, no one needs fame, just a handshake and a name. Come home, come home, where the cross stands long. Come and share the love of all. Oh, oh, oh. Come and share the love of all.
Thank you for gathering here at Hillbilly Cat History, where we remember together and listen for the echoes. And today, we're going to hear echoes about somebody getting married. And it's April 27th, 1967. It's the last day of filming for Clambake. And then it's all over. And Elvis is free to move on with the rest of his life And in a few days, he's going to get married. And Marty says, Marty Lacker, Elvis's friend that he knew from high school, but they really became friends in the late 1950s after Elvis had bought Graceland. Marty started to hang out at Graceland a little bit. And then when Elvis returned from the army, he offered to Marty a chance to go to Hollywood, be part of the Memphis Mafia, although that's not what they called it. They were just the guys. And Marty talked to his wife, and they worked it out, and Marty headed to California with Elvis. And he was with him on and off through the rest of Elvis's life. And Marty was in charge of the wedding. And here's what he says. In December 1966, Elvis had informed me that he was going to marry Priscilla, and he asked me to be his best man. Joe Esposito and I became dual best men for the coming wedding. It had been postponed once, but in April, Colonel Parker held a meeting with Elvis, Joe, and me. Plans were made for Joe to handle part of the arrangement, and I was to take care of the rest. Marty's telling us something that's slightly different than what we've heard before. And Keith says that this should be a good one and clear the air on what happened with the whole wedding deal with Elvis. Hi, Colleen. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. Marty tells us that he knew in December 1966 that Elvis was getting married. Pretty much everybody knew in December 1966 because that's when Elvis got engaged. And I think we had seen in an earlier episode that at the movie theater one night in December, when he had rented the movies, he was showing Priscilla's ring and telling everybody that they were engaged. I'll have to find that quote and bring it back out for a upcoming, very near episode. I believe that was from The Diary of Donna Lewis. So I'm going to have to pull that back up. But Marty's saying that he knew in December. So he's just verifying that that's when this information came out. Pretty much everybody knew. But he also says that Elvis had asked him to be his best man. And then he says Joe Esposito and I became dual best men for the coming wedding. So that's very different. Usually you have a best man, then you may have two groomsmen. But there's only one best man. It's usually the guy that's going to carry the ring. Well, in this case, something else happened after Elvis had asked Marty to be the best man. Some of the other guys interpreted it to be that Marty fell out of favor. Now, in a few months, Marty's going to receive a reprimand from the colonel, and it's about his abuse of prescription drugs. So it could be that this is the beginning of that cycle. And shortly after Elvis says this, sometime in the next few months, because it's going to be late March that Marty receives this reprimand. So sometime in January or February, or maybe even March, we haven't nailed it down yet. But Elvis says, hey, I'm going to have a second best man. And it could just be that Elvis wanted Joe Esposito to also be his best man because Elvis loved Joe Esposito as well. And Joe Esposito was the foreman. Technically, Joe and Marty were co-foremen, but Joe had been foreman the longest. And so maybe Elvis felt since they were co-foremen, it would be best to have them as co-best men. Marty explains this in more detail in another place, but for now, we're just going to go with what he said here. He's glossed it over a little bit, but we'll dig deeper in a future episode. And Keith says that he strongly believes that Priscilla was pregnant when they got married. And Colleen agrees, and Linda says that she believes that too. Well, we'll take a look at the timeline, and we'll see if it can tell us anything. But Marty's also telling us that the wedding had been postponed once. So technically, they were already supposed to be married. But what's odd here is it says, Marty says, the wedding has been postponed once, but in April, Colonel Parker held a meeting with Elvis and Joe and me. So that would indicate that this is a meeting roughly a month or a little less than a month after the meeting that Colonel held where he demoted Marty and put him in charge of special projects. And the special project was to be the wedding. But now Colonel Parker has had a meeting with Elvis and Joe and Marty. So the Colonel's brought Joe into this, Joe Esposito. Now, Joe's been with Elvis since the Army days. He met Elvis in Germany. They had a good time together. Joe proved that he was the kind of man who could pick up a receipt and put it in his pocket and safely bring it back to Vernon. And that he knew how to count change and collect it all, and he was good with money. Good with taking care of things that were important to a normal, everyday individual, like keys and money and stuff like that. And so it was handy to have a man like Joe around. He was a very responsible person. So the Colonel's brought Joe into this. And then Marty tells us plans were made for Joe to handle part of the arrangement. Well, if Marty was in charge of special projects, why is Joe now handling part of the arrangement? This indicates to me that something went wrong here. And backup had to be brought in to help Marty finish this project. Now, Marty's saying it's been postponed. But we know, because we can see into the future, that the wedding's going to occur on May 1st. So if they held the meeting in April to postpone the wedding, that means the wedding was sometime planned for sometime in April. Well, it only makes sense that they would have to postpone it because he filmed Clambake until April 27th. So that could have been because there had been the delay because of his concussion. So Elvis had a concussion in the middle of March where he fell and hit his head on his bathtub or the floor of the bathroom. They took an x-ray, looked like everything was okay as far as his skull went, but he did have a concussion. So maybe that added the 2 weeks to the filming cycle, and that's what pushed the wedding off. But Marty's indicating it would have already happened here. And if we took that into account, it said that maybe Elvis and Priscilla couldn't wait any longer. That may account for some of the pieces that we've just heard about strong beliefs about when Lisa Marie was conceived. And Keith is asking if Gary Pepper was at the wedding. No, he was not. There are only a few people at the wedding. We're going to find out who they were. Hi, Regina. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. This is a picture of Elvis and Priscilla. It's not a very good picture, but Priscilla looks very happy. You could never really trust the colors in these pictures, but Elvis appears to be wearing a bright yellow shirt. This picture was captioned as April 1967, but I don't know the exact date or even that it truly is from April 1967. But it could be a depiction of something, a moment in time, not sure when, but apparently Priscilla is in California at some point during April. At least if we believe this picture. Now, we know for sure she's there by the end of April, and I'll show you how we know that, but according to this picture, she was there at least a little bit before. Or maybe this is from that same day. I don't really know. And Marion says that they both look happy to her. And since they're getting married, you would hope that they are both happy. But Elvis doesn't appear in this picture to be someone who's dreading the future, getting ready to do something he doesn't want to do. He could be hiding that. Now, Larry Geller, he says, well, before I read what Larry says, let's remember that Larry was part of the meeting that happened earlier in March after Elvis had his concussion, when Marty was relieved from being a foreman. Basically, Marty would no longer write checks, and he was put in charge of special projects, the wedding. Larry was told, along with everyone else, but it was pointed to Larry, not to bring any more spiritual books and not to have any more spiritual discussions with Elvis, that was cluttering up his mind. And it's the Colonel who said this to him, according to Priscilla, according to Larry. I gotta kind of believe that, because Priscilla and Larry, they're not the kind to agree on anything. So when they independently put forth the same witness, they've witnessed the same events and they've heard the same words, well, I've got to kind of give it to that. So apparently the Colonel said something about cluttering up his mind with these books. And the Colonel may have told people not to leave Elvis alone with Larry. Elvis may have told people not to leave him alone with Larry. No one says that Elvis or the Colonel said that, but they all agree that they knew not to leave Elvis alone with Larry. And Larry agrees that no one left him alone with Elvis. And here's what Larry says. I stayed on for a couple of months more, but Elvis and I never spent another moment in private. Suddenly it was open season on the Swami, and the guys made no effort to be discreet or cute about the name calling. Elvis just stood by silently, watching. I felt not only that I had lost a friend, but that my friend had lost himself. And Linda says that she thinks Elvis loved Priscilla, but she's not sure that Elvis wanted to be married. And Pat agrees with Linda. Hi, Pat. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. And Pat says that she thinks Elvis was making the best and took the marriage seriously. And that could be too. All we can see is this snapshot in time. But Larry says what we're seeing here in this snapshot is Larry losing his friend and his friend losing himself. Now, Larry, to me, in this quote, and this is just me, it's my opinion, so everybody's welcome to their own opinion, and feel free to put those in the chat and the comments. Everybody's opinion's welcome. Everybody gets to walk away with their own opinion. We're here to look at the source material, what these people actually said, try to filter through it, and then decide, our opinions for ourselves. But when I see Larry saying this, he's talking about the month of April, basically. There's a little bit of March, most of April, the 5 weeks of stag party that we've seen described by Elvis's co-star in the last few videos. So everybody on this set is having a great deal of fun, except for Larry. Larry says that he is suffering because the guys are calling him names and they're not being discreet about it. Now, we've seen that Charlie Hodge is getting soaked with buckets of water, that Elvis is getting hit with water balloons, that the director, Arthur Nadell, took a cake in the face, that Bill Bixby gets a pie in the face. Larry is very concerned that some people are calling him names. So it seems like there's probably name calling going on with the pie throwing. It's the way I feel towards everyone. Could be wrong. But Larry is very sensitive about this. It hurts him a lot. And he sees that it's Elvis losing himself, but Larry doesn't indicate that he notices that Elvis is about to be married. And this is the month before he's going to be married. Now, Larry doesn't know the exact date that Elvis will be married, but he knows it's coming up real soon. And he knows he's got to do this film that he's way behind on because of these other issues, like the concussion. But Larry is very concerned about the name calling towards himself, the fact that he can't be with Elvis. He says Elvis is standing by watching all this. But we know that Elvis is very, very busy at this moment. So I'm not sure. I guess maybe I should take a step back and say, I'm not really sure what to think about what Larry's saying here. Other than that he felt like he was suffering during this period. And Marion says that she agrees with Pat that Elvis was making the best of a bad situation and taking the marriage seriously, and that she thinks Elvis must have liked Priscilla in some way, and that Priscilla didn't see him that often, so surely she was always nice to him. And Pat says that she feels sorry for Larry because they turned on him, and she's sure that Larry felt betrayed. And Pat and Colleen agree with Marion that Priscilla probably had a very nice face towards Elvis when she saw him, because they didn't spend as much time as many of us might think that they did together. And Keith says that I think Larry went overboard with Elvis with his conversations. I think he might have said something that triggered Elvis at some point, but we don't know. And Linda says, I still feel kind of bad for Larry. Gunn saying that she believes that Elvis was not ready to be married, but he felt pressure from Parker and Priscilla's father, if she wasn't pregnant, of course. Because if she was pregnant, I'm assuming you're saying that Elvis would feel like he needed to get married in order to do the right thing, to give his child a father. Of course, you didn't say that, so I don't want to put those words in your mouth, but I'm just kind of taking that from the meaning. And Gunn says, why did Larry stay just for fixing his hair? Yes, he had to fix his hair. Larry's contracted like everybody else at this time, right? Like, I guess he doesn't really have a contract. He could have just walked out, but that would have been extremely unprofessional of Larry. And Larry is a consummate professional. We've got to give that to him. Larry is a good businessman, and he treats his clients with care and respect and love. I couldn't take that from Larry. Larry started a major business along with Jay Sebring in California. They were the first ones to take men's hairstyling seriously, and they had a lot of famous clientele, like Paul Newman. So they knew a lot of people in the entertainment industry. So no matter what Larry thought about the situation, I'm sure he was going to stick it out to the end, because this was a job. And then once Clambake was over, then Larry's professional obligations would at that point be done. Now, Marty Lacker says, to get reporters off the track, Elvis Joe, his wife Joni, and George Klein would fly to Palm Springs on the night of April 29th. So plans are made for Elvis to be married. The Colonel has set this up in the background. It's going to happen on May 1st. They apparently know it's going to happen on May 1st by at least April 29th, probably by April 28th. Could be that as of the day that Clambake ends, maybe that's the day when Elvis and the Colonel said, okay, we've got the date set, let's move forward. But we're not sure when they nailed down the date of May 1st. But it's definitely by now, because they're bringing in Joe Esposito, his wife Joni, and George Klein. They're going to fly to Palm Springs, where Elvis owns a house. They're going to stay there on the night of April 29th. Then there'll be one more day, April 30th. And then the wedding will occur the day after that. But nobody really knows that, except the people right around Elvis. So at some point, and again, I'm not sure when Priscilla gets to California. She may have been there the whole time. But at some point before they get married, there's of course a bridal shower. And it's got to be sometime in these few days. We might be able to nail it down here in a second a little better. But Dee Presley, who is Vernon's wife, will be there, as well as Priscilla. I believe Dee is technically throwing this party for Priscilla. On April 30th, which is the day before Elvis and Priscilla get married, Larry Geller voluntarily leaves Elvis's employment. Then here's how he describes it. Larry says, "It was like taking my arm off. It was so painful. There was no financial reason for me to endure the insults and the coldness." So Larry says that it hurt him terribly to leave Elvis, like taking his arm off. But that he didn't have a financial tie to Elvis, that he could make as much on the open market as he could for Elvis. Now, this is very fanciful and wishful thinking on Larry Geller's part. He could potentially do extremely well and even exceed what Elvis had paid him, but it would come at a very high price. He would have to invest heavily to make that happen. You don't cut hair out in the middle of the park. He may be able to travel to some people's homes, but mostly, like Jay had already proven, you've got to have a salon somewhere. And that costs bucks to open that thing. Then you got to deal with employees. You got to put in a lot of investment up front and a lot of your own time. But Larry could not have just walked away and walked into another job making as much as Elvis was paying him. Just at some point I'll be able to show you some numbers about Larry, but that's just not possible. He could get close. He was a very well-paid individual. And he could walk right into another salon that was open to doing men's hair and rent a booth and start going at it. And he could make a lot of money, but it wouldn't be the amount of money that he was making from Elvis or the amount of effort he was putting in to working for Elvis. But Larry says there's no financial reason for him to endure the insults and the coldness. So he's indicating to us that whatever he was suffering or perceived he was suffering was so terrible to him that he was willing to leave Elvis over it. And Gunn says, wonder why they chose such a small wedding. Well, we're going to be getting into that. And Keith says Dee did some TV appearances on a show where her and J.D. Sumner went at it. Yeah, very famous TV appearance. In that appearance, there was a man from a tabloid, pretty sure in that one, that was with Dee. A lot of people have very, very poor opinions of Dee. And I'm not indicating or saying that those opinions are unwarranted. But if you look at every instance where Dee has terrible behavior, there is a male somewhere close by that is pushing her into it. Doesn't mean it's not her fault. I believe she may have been extremely troubled, because there's a lot of stories about arguments and yelling and screaming that she had with Vernon, who was a very calm individual. Although they say he went at it with Gladys too in some stories. So these are all unverified stories. I don't really know the truth of this. But she is a very controversial figure. But she's in Elvis's life from 1960 right to the end. And she does play some kind of role because she's always influencing Vernon. And Vernon is very influential to Elvis. And Linda's saying, or Keith is, Colleen is verifying that it was the Geraldo Rivera show. I think that was the show. I think Geraldo, he's tied into all the terrible Elvis news media stuff. Geraldo is like Steve Dunleavy or Ronna Barrett. Once you see those names, this is not a serious thing. This is an entertainment and try to make me famous by using somebody else's name kind of thing. And Linda says that Dee went way too far. She absolutely went too far. But I don't think that anybody truly understands Dee's story, because she's pushed into the background, and I believe her children, at least two of them, used her, as well as other people. And Keith says, poor Vernon. I think there was a lot of that too. I think Vernon suffered horribly for his decision to marry Dee. And he knew right from the first moment that things were, gonna be rough, but he got bullheaded just like Elvis could. And maybe he really loved her. Maybe he was totally I know he was head over heels about her for a while. But by the mid 70s, that had all cooled away. And, by the end of Elvis's life, she's not living with Vernon. He's living with another woman. And Marion says that I absolutely understand, Larry. You can't cope with being bullied for a long time without getting sick of it. I would say that's absolutely true as well. So I think the question is more, was Larry bullied? Or did Larry perceive he was being bullied? He certainly perceived that Elvis was saying it was okay to bully him, but Elvis never says that. Larry's reading that into Elvis's silence. But I'm thinking Elvis might have just been distracted in those periods of time, and he just wasn't paying any attention to Larry. Although we've also got the evidence that the Colonel and Priscilla were persuading Elvis heavily that Larry was bad news. So there is a good chance that Larry maybe was bullied. Or at least that he got the cold shoulder, and the cold shoulder can be almost as bad as being bullied too. And Colleen says that Lisa Marie had to hear the garbage that Dee was spewing. That's so wrong. That's true as well. Absolutely true. And Keith says, I think she stayed away from Lisa Marie. Well, I don't think Priscilla would have had anything to do with Dee once she was excluded from the family. And Linda says that none of the people seem to think about what Lisa Marie had to hear from what they were saying. And not just Lisa Marie, I mean, just the fans in general. I don't know why some of them want to say the things that they do anyway. The very questionable things. But it all gets out there. Well, I mean, I know why they do it. There's dollars and such involved. And Colleen says Larry came back, so it couldn't have been all that bad. Yeah, he doesn't come back for a while. He's gone for a while. And I think that time often brings perspective. And I do think that Larry was a little self-interested at this moment in time. Like, he was very self-focused. And even when he writes about it years later, and he understands the timeline and what was happening the next day, we're going to read this quote now from him. And you're going to see that I still don't think, to me, he doesn't get it. He doesn't understand that the date means that Elvis was so preoccupied with other things that now was the time, after the wedding, when maybe there could have been time for reconciliation, for talk, for deep thinking. But I believe that all of April, at least up to the 27th, and then even after, because the wedding was going to come so quickly, it's just a rush. Elvis is just rushing through day to day, just trying to get everything done. And think about all the people that we've heard from in these stories. Elvis has to deal with every single one of these people every single day. And they've all got a lot of needs and wants, even if it's not about money. Elvis is in a position where he does gain a lot from all of those interactions. But they also, they take something from him. They take time. They take resources. They take his strength. And he's just gotten over this concussion. People are counting on him for money. He's got to get this thing made. They get it done by the 27th. Now they're moving into the wedding. Everybody seems to be on board with this and working as a team. And we've heard that through the camaraderie that was on the set. Everybody but Larry. And maybe it is because he was being bullied and pushed away. But Marty Lacker says, Mr. Presley, who is Vernon, Mr. Presley and his wife Dee were going to take the train from Memphis, and they were to get off the train in San Bernardino, California, to avoid any reporters at the Los Angeles station. Jerry and Sandy Schilling and I packed them up by automobile and drove them to Palm Springs. So Marty's indicating that, and I assume this was be part of special projects, the wedding. Vernon and Dee, they took a train all the way from Memphis, which must have taken, I don't know, a couple of days. And they got off the train, not where the reporters would think they would get off, but like a stop. I think San Bernardino's a stop before, maybe a stop after. And then Marty and Jerry and his wife, Sandy, they pick up Dee and Vernon, and they drive them to Elvis's house in Palm Springs. He doesn't tell us what day that is, but that's how Dee makes it to this party. Don't know if that's the day she gets there or the day after, but that's how Dee gets from Memphis at Graceland, or where they're living on Dolan Drive, and makes it to the house in California, in Palm Springs. And Gunn says Elvis asked him to come back, asked Larry. I believe so. I don't remember when Larry comes back or why. And Gunn's asking who did Elvis's hair when Larry was not there. He had several other people. So there was a lady who she would claim to be the only female Memphis Mafia member. But the guys, they snicker about that, and they always say that there are no women, female Mafia members. I am blanking out on what her name is. Patty Perry, I think it's Patty Perry. And she lived, I believe, in Los Angeles. And then back in Memphis, Elvis has a regular barber, Homer Galland. And Homer ends up with like all kinds of paraphernalia and merchandise and all kinds of stuff that Elvis had. Things from Elvis's house, pieces that Elvis gave him, stuff he took out of the trash at different hotels that he would go to Elvis with. Because Elvis did sometimes take him like on tour or brought him out to the movies or something. But Homer had actually cut Gladys and Vernon's hair. And there's a couple of others, but I don't remember their names off the top of my head or their relationship, how they came in. But I know there's at least 2 or 3 other people that would cut Elvis's hair. Plus, there were always studio makeup people if you had to have them. And Linda says that they take an emotional toll on Elvis. Yeah, the people that he has to deal with every day. That's right. And sometimes they give emotion, good emotion, but sometimes they're taking. So it's still stressful every day. There's a lot of it every day. And Marion says that Larry's grandmother, I think, was murdered, and his mother got kind of depressed. And after that terrible event, his mother and Larry got into spirituality. I don't remember that detail, but sounds absolutely like Larry, so I will take your word for that, Marion. I assume that was probably in one of his books, and I'm just not remembering it off the top of my head. And Regina says that yes, Larry was asked by Elvis to come back after the divorce. Well, that's interesting. After the divorce, and it's the Colonel that really wants Larry to be gone. But at the exact same time that Priscilla probably gained some more control and power because she is now married, or about to be, to Elvis. And Gunn saying, thank you, Regina. Yes, thank you so much for knowing that bit of the history. And Marion says, Patsy Perry, she thinks is right as well. Thank you for that confirmation. But let's hear what Larry has to actually say about his last day with Elvis. And the first thing would be that he wasn't actually with Elvis. So after, I think, April 27th, after the filming stopped, Larry, I believe, went back to his home, which was somewhere in California, with his wife and his child. And I think he had an apartment. But he says that one day in late April 1967, and just so that we all understand, this day in late April 1967, it's the last day of April, April 30th, 1967. Marion's saying that Larry told about his background. I cannot pronounce that word, but I'm going to try it. Ostriches. But however you say that channel, it is an incredible, wonderful Elvis channel. It does have a lot of foreign language stuff because it is not from the USA, but they do a lot of Elvis stuff in English because either they're going to translate it directly from the person during an interview, or they just do the total interview in English. And such a wonderful channel. So if you guys get a chance to go watch that one, I'll try to pull up some of those and link them at some point in the post and stuff, because they are fantastic. Hi, Linda Jewell. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. Hi, Luann. Thank you for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. Happy coffee. So let's get back to what Larry says. He says, one day in late April 1967, the 30th, I called Elvis's house to tell him that I wasn't coming back. Jerry Schilling got on the line and said, Larry, you better come to the house right now. We're all going to Vegas. I didn't respond. So they were all going to Vegas. What else was new? We're all going to Vegas, he repeated, as if I would pick up on his meaning. No, Jerry, I answered, I can't go. Well, you've got to be here, man, Jerry said. Otherwise, we're going. We're leaving town. Jerry, I just can't go, I insisted. I'll let you all go. The next day, I went to the market to pick up some groceries and the paper. I saw the front page headline, Elvis Presley is married, running above a large photograph of Elvis and Priscilla smiling happily in their wedding attire. Larry calls the Palm Springs house, where everybody is in a tizzy because they're getting ready to go to Vegas. They're going to fly out there and they're going to go to this wedding. This is the biggest deal of the whole year. This is even bigger than Circle G. And Jerry Schilling says, you've got to come. We're all going to Vegas. And Larry says, nah, I don't want to go. And Jerry says, we're all going to Vegas, man. Hint, hint, it's happening. You know, the eagle has landed. Larry's not picking up what Jerry's laying down. Doesn't understand anything that's being said to him. And apparently just doesn't care. Very wrapped up in what's happened to him, or what he feels has happened. And he chooses that moment to walk away. But if he had gone to the wedding, well, he wouldn't have gotten in, because turns out there's going to be a very limited amount of people that are in on the wedding. So it's not really clear why they're even taking everybody out there, although there will be a reception for 100 people. Nobody knows this yet. So Larry would have been at the reception, but he would not have been in the wedding itself. but he probably would have been in on all the Palm Springs fun that follows, as well as going back to Graceland, or back to the Circle G afterwards. So one thing I wonder is what happened to Larry's horse? Does it just stay with Elvis? Because we don't really know. I mean, I don't think Larry was in a position to have a horse in California. So I'm assuming that it did. But Larry doesn't ever tell us what happens to that horse. And Priscilla Presley says, after Larry left, Elvis locked away many of his books. I told him I was glad, that they were literally destroying us. We were engaged to be married. Would it make you feel better if I just got rid of them all? Elvis asked. I nodded. That night, at 3 a.m, Elvis and I piled a huge stack of his books and magazines into a large box and dumped them into an abandoned water well behind Graceland. We poured gasoline over the pile, lit a match, and kissed the past goodbye. A lot of people get very angry over this story, that Elvis burnt a lot of his books. But if we look closely at this story, okay, I'm not saying that this story is not true, but this story does not fit the timeline properly, the way that Priscilla tells it. Larry seems to know that books were burnt at a later point because he talks to Elvis about it. And so I do believe that there must have been burnt books at some point. But what Priscilla says is after Larry left. Well, the day after Larry leaves, they get married. So she may be thinking of Larry leaving as the 27th, the day that the filming ended, or maybe Larry left a week before. Like, I don't really know that he stayed to the end of Clam Bake. I'm just assuming, because there's nobody saying, well, Larry left and somebody else had to cut Elvis's hair. You feel like that would have made it into the stories. But she says that they go out behind Graceland and dump it into some well that's back there. Well, they're not at Graceland. They're in California. She indicates this happens while they're engaged. Well, everything that happens with Larry, from the point that Elvis has the concussion and Larry is ostracized and said no more books, that all occurs in California. So if they burnt books, it was at some point after they got married. And of course, Larry had left by that point. But there are details in this story that cannot be factually accurate. Such as, we were engaged to be married. It couldn't have been during that time. Unless it was before Larry was ostracized, and therefore Elvis came to California knowing what he was going to do to Larry, but that doesn't really make sense because Larry was part of the whole Circle G thing at that moment. And Pat says, so very sad, it should never have happened. And Luann says that Elvis doesn't seem like the type to go out and burn stuff. And Pat says, it looks to me that Priscilla was trying to take anyone close to Elvis to go away. And Luann says, don't feel it's in his nature to do stuff like that. Later, Elvis will tell Larry that, according to Larry, that the books he burnt were the ones that he didn't like, the ones that he didn't find meaning in, the ones that weren't speaking to him. He was basically lightening the load of the trunk that he liked to carry around, and these books didn't make the cut. So these were not books that had knowledge that he felt was worth anyone reading, and therefore he went ahead and burnt those. But that the books that meant something to him, like, he kept all those. And Priscilla does indicate here that he locked away many of his books. And then she says that Elvis and she piled a huge stack of his books and magazines into a large box. Well, Elvis had well over one trunk of books, so they wouldn't all fit in a big box. Elvis didn't burn all of his books. He burned some portion of something to appease Priscilla, but it didn't happen at this moment, which is when it would have happened, according to the way she told it. It's just another indication that people, their memories are built around emotional moments, but the facts of things, the time and place and things like, they don't imprint as well into the memory in most cases. And Linda says that Priscilla's story very often doesn't match up. Yes, that is true. And I spoke in an earlier episode today about when these books were written and there was no internet. I think a lot of people believed that they could say whatever they wanted and it would never catch up with them. And for some, it never will, because they're not here anymore. But some are still publishing books. And Anna says, I can see where he burnt the books, but that he did not like or need anymore. Right. These weren't books of true meaning to him. They could have been like phone books for all I know. And Pat says that Elvis was the type of person who would hang on to a book or give it away to someone. He would, but I think there were some of these books he felt shouldn't be given away. They weren't worthwhile. They didn't say what he needed to communicate to someone. And Luann says that Elvis hangs on to his books or anything. He does. He's very thrifty. And so is Verdon. These two guys, they didn't waste anything. And Elvis was like the number one recycler in the world, or regifter. He made things go a long way. And Gunn says that Priscilla didn't like him reading the books, so she made him get rid of them. And then to make her happy, I have heard. I believe there is truth to that, and that's what she's saying here, that she's told Elvis she doesn't like these books and what Larry's put in his mind, and he is appeasing her by burning these books. And now she'll stop, irritating him about getting rid of them. I also think at this moment in time, he had no need to read the spiritual books. He was very busy with too many other things. And so the reading quest was put to the side for a while. And he knew it would be put to the side for a while, so he was willing to let it be sidelined, because it already was. And then he would retrieve it later and get back into it. But that's, again, just my feeling about it. And that brings us to the end of another hour of what I hope you guys think is great Elvis content. And we've got a lot more to go through, because we've still got to get through the entire wedding. And like Clam Bake, or like the concussion, it's one of these momentous events we have to spiral into. And we're going to do that over the next several episodes. But I'm going to leave you now with a song called Trust in Motion, which is all about Elvis giving a car to George Klein and regifting George's older car, but still pretty new, still pretty nice, over to Gary Pepper. Because like I said, Elvis is the king of recyclers. You all keep on taking care of business.
Radio static, Memphis bound, WABQ homes a sacred sound. Green, green grass, again and again. The DJ's risk for a loyal friend. Elvis smiles, no words exchanged, just a test of love on a range. Keys in the dark, showroom glow, a Cadillac waits in a silent show. Merry Christmas, GK said, a yellow chariot, tears on shade. What's fame and fortune worth, my friend, if it's not something we can lend? The Chevy Impala, still shining new, passed from Klein to the Circle G crew. Gary